Um, it says we're live, but is it true? There we are live. Excellent. We've got it. We are all together in one place here. So hello, everyone. I am Kat Udero, psychic empath and psychic wrangler. And before we see who I have wrangled in today to today's show, let me welcome you to Third Eye Salon, where in each and every show, we take a fresh look and a deep look between the veils of reality. Now, today we're looking between the veils of Ishtar Howell's non-NDE near-death experience. What are we talking about? Well, stick around. We'll explain it to you, or he'll explain it to us, rather. And we're also going to be looking at his work as a meditation teacher, an astrologist, a permaculturist, and maybe even his musical artistry. If we have time, we'll see. But before we get into all of that juiciness, let's say hello to my bestie, Linda Coulter-Burge. She is a psychic. She is a conscious business coach. Linda, I love you. How are you today?
I'm sleepy today. I'm going to be honest. It's all about honesty here, guys. But I will still be your live stream chat host. And as always, the rule is play nice or get out. We don't have time for meanness in this group. So please like, share, and subscribe to keep this fire so that more people see our awesome podcasts. And be sure to check us out on our podcasts on Apple and Spotify. Thank you again for all of our support and for the donations you've given Third Eye Salon so we can continue to grow and have a wonderful community both here and in our Facebook group. So if you aren't part of our Facebook group yet, please join it. We continue the conversations there. And with that, hello, Ishtar. I'm so excited to see you and learn more about everything. We've already had a great conversation so far.
Hello, Linda. It's been quite nice that you're from Oregon, so we get to have that easy bonding. And while it's morning for you, I still haven't woken up, and it's 5 p.m. for me. So sleep is in the air. At least it's time for my siesta. I miss the siesta over here in the Iberian Peninsula. So hopefully I won't be too zombified.
Oh.
We'll make sure.
I think this is a sleepy time for everyone. In fact, a lot of my clients are saying they've been having a hard time sleeping and now they're able to sleep. So let's take it. Let's enjoy it. Yeah. But not during the show. Okay.
Not during the show, everyone. Come on. Get some coffee. All right. With that, thank you, Ishtar. Let's also say hello to Angela Anderson, artist, motorcycle mechanic, former software engineer, channeler of oneness. The amazing Angela. How are you today, love?
I'm feeling really mellow and chill. I'm not going to use sleepy. I'm going to say I'm mellow and chill this morning. So I'm excited for this show today. Ishtar has such a beautiful story of surrender and just being able to follow the guideposts. So I'm so excited for our audience to be able to hear his story today. So yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Excited but calm. Excited but mellow.
Excited but calm.
Yeah.
That's good. It's definitely a theme. It's definitely a theme of people. I don't know. Maybe it's just a regenesis process where we're coming out of changing seasons and getting our energy aligned for what's coming next. But anywho, let's talk about Mr. Ishtar so we can find out more about him with the bio, and then we'll get into our conversation. So Ishtar is a meditation teacher, monk, gardener, intuitive, and writer. As a 13-year-old, he was an NDE or NDE adjacent, I'm going to call it, which shortly thereafter propelled him on a spiritual path. At 18, he learned a meditation practice called the Ishayas Ascension. Did I say that right? Ishayas?
Yes, you got it. Perfect.
Yay. Ishayas Ascension, and entered an ashram centered on the practice, spending long periods of time in meditative retreat, putting in long hours of service work, and teaching meditation classes around the world. In 2008, he left his monastic organization and then took an extended break from meditation teaching and attended university. The years lived outside of the semi-cloistered environment of the ashram were challenging, but ultimately led to a more deeply anchored presence. Subtle barriers fell away, opening to the experience of the world as the self, which I really want to hear about that, how experiencing the world as yourself and therefore just being in that conscious relationship to that level. I think that's hashtag goals right there for me. The process continues to unfold and expand. Since 2014, he has served as a trail guide on the path, helping people cultivate awareness and relax into the wholeness that is already here. He works as an evolutionary astrologer, helping people connect with their guiding myths and soul music. More information can be found on his primary websites, which are down below under his bio, ascension-meditation.com and awakenedlightastrology.com. So give us a thumbs up if you are excited to learn more about Ishtar's non-NDE near-death experience, or how he finds astrology to be like music, which I think we talked about that in our pre-show chat. And I thought that was, his analogies were just very connected. And it was, I could feel what he was saying when he was talking about it. So I definitely want to get into that. But hey, welcome again, Ishtar. We're excited that you're here. I wanted to hop in and just kind of ask you, just kind of deviate for a moment before we get into the overall narrative of like kind of your beginning.
Let's deviate.
I'm kind of a deviant, if you haven't noticed. I'm just curious what you studied at university, like when because you've gone into meditation and that was your thing, and you really had this calling to do that, even though it wasn't your thoughts as a kid growing up. It was never a goal. But then where did you go off and do in university?
Oh God, it was a bit of a smorgasbord, really, which is what I was actually after, truth be told. But I didn't want to do something that I felt I was too good at already. But maybe that wasn't actually such a practical decision. I think I would have had an exceedingly easy time if I just decided to be a history major from the start, and maybe would have rode that into a master's and a PhD or something like that, because that was always the easiest thing. But instead, I thought I wanted to go into philosophy, and I really wanted to challenge my mind in ways that maybe I hadn't in sort of the monastic life. And I wanted to dig into formalized thought and explore that. I also wanted to learn Chinese as best I could, because I'd spent time in Hong Kong as a meditation teacher and fell in love with the culture. They don't really offer Cantonese at many U.S. universities, just because it's smaller. And so, but they offered Mandarin, which I was okay, fine, I'll jump into that. So there was philosophy, Mandarin. I did take a lot of history courses, and I minored in economics. And then I had, at the beginning, thought I'd become an architect, but then I realized that I'd have to sleep underneath my drafting table and kind of focus on my making really dreary modernist cardboard structures, which isn't my thing. I'm more into anachronistic styles. I like Art Nouveau. I actually love Frank Lloyd Wright, not necessarily in vogue in architecture schools for the most part. And when I realized I'd have to sleep under the drafting table, I was like, oh God, no 5 hour. No, didn't want to do 5 hour energies, every night of the week. So I landed in philosophy and Mandarin. And
I didn't realize the architecture life was so demanding and rigorous.
It's actually, I think it's really bad, but we could get into that. I mean, I think it's generally like that at most universities, and I don't think it's actually the training, the demands at the university.
Of the training. I get it.
The training, right. but then of course, every professor, most of the professors in the department, you try to ward you off the profession. They say, you have to dress like a lawyer but get paid half as much, or one-liners like that, and so.
Have I killed your dream yet? Are you still here? I guess you're going to graduate.
I think it's admirable in a sense. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's probably true. It is one of those things where it's like you really do, because people have a fantasy of what it's going to, we all do that, right? We have a fantasy of what our lives are going to look like. And then life just slaps us upside the head. If we're lucky, throws us down the stairs. If we're not, God love life. So let's go ahead and talk about your experiences coming into this planet, because I think that, like Linda, you have memories of being in the crib, and you have memories like a lot of people are like, you don't have memories until you're 2 years old. But like Linda came in remembering. I'll let you speak a little bit about that, Linda, and then we'll toss the mic over to compare.
Yeah, I'm curious.
Ishtar's.
Sure. Yeah. So first of all, I was a philosophy minor. And I always wanted to be an architect. So more in common. must run in our DNA at some level, the mass grouping of us. So for me, yeah, I remember actually my past life. I came in remembering it. So I remember how I was murdered in my past life, and I remembered it as a baby. But I remember being in the crib. My mom actually told me that when she brought me home, she put me in the crib. And so, day or two old, I think she brought me in right after, and walked out of the room to get something, came back in, and I was no longer laying on my back in the middle of the crib, but I was at the end of the crib with my head through the bars. And so she has no idea how I got there. There was no one else available that would have put me there. And I can remember being in the crib. I can remember the bumpers that she put in there. I can remember before the bumpers that she put in there. So that was the day I came home, because the bumpers came in that day. I can remember, crawling across the floor at 6 months and having it verified what I was seeing. So people who say you can't remember, BS. You can remember. Not everybody can remember, but it is possible.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
I remember. I never really I didn't doubt my memory so much. Although I was a very proud doubting Thomas, and I still am. And I kind of like to play that role in the spiritual community, because I think there needs to be a whole lot more of it, in a certain way. Which part of the reason I did philosophy was I thought, okay, I wanted to, when I was a kid, I wanted to be a parapsychologist, and I thought, well, we have to be both scientists and mystics in a certain sense, and if you can combine both of those things, then you've kind of got both your feet on the ground and your crown chakra in the heavens, and that was actually the parapsychological desire came about because of a lot of early experiences, and I think because I had two parts in mine. I had a lot of early memories. I remember being trained how to walk, which was fun. And I don't exactly know how early that was, but I remember either my sister or my mother, getting on their knees in the middle of the living room, and I'm, in crawling mode, and they're giving various suggestions, and I'd get up and then I'd fall, and I get up and fall, and they made it into a kind of a game, how to get me over. They'd hold little stuffed animals and other things, or hold their arms out as if I get a hug if I get to the end. So, lots of that. But I would sit in the crib, and I would, especially in the mornings when nobody was up yet and before the sun came up, I would just be awake, and I would do this just kind of very naturalistic meditation in which I would feel this wonderful bliss kind of accumulating in my stomach, and which would rise through the rest of my body. And then I would enjoy putting my awareness into different objects, like the chest of drawers. I liked putting my awareness in that. I don't know why. It was, made of wood, at least. My curtains, different things like that. And I would kind of track around the room and enjoy this sort of sense of being in everything. And that was kind of there for a number of years. It was even there when I was, having a temper tantrum. like you do when you're a kid. There was this kind of witnessing sort of living room parlor that was sort of like an inner body, that I would be sitting in even when I was complaining about this or that, or I needed to watch Ghostbusters, and I did that a lot. If I didn't get to watch Ghostbusters, I would just complain until and so I basically watched Ghostbusters once a day, every day. And I had to watch Ghostbusters, I think, it made me feel comfortable because I was seeing spirits. And I think, looking back, I don't know why, but I think that, using Bill Murray and Dan Aykroyd and those guys as kind of archetypes gave me a sense of power, gave my psyche a sense of power and safety in sort of dealing with the different phenomena. People would walk by the crib, like who weren't obviously not part of my family, and walk through walls. Some of them were very friendly, some of them were kind of sketchy, and it was the sketchy ones that I needed to watch Ghostbusters for, in all likelihood. So, that kind of went on. I didn't really ever talk about it because I seemed to be handling it fairly well, especially because I was given a toy proton pack. Ghostbusters toy. It was one of probably the best toys ever given to me. They had no idea that was giving me such confidence. And it made a sound when you pulled the trigger, and I would, chase the damn, sketchy ones. Say like, I'm coming for you. And that was really good. I needed that. So, that was part of childhood. And it was, when I got to about age 6 or 7, that was kind of the time to develop an ego, or really go into this sort of separate self sense. Was, the seeds of that were sprouting, and I think I was also enthusiastically jumping into that.
I'm curious.
Just like any normal child.
Oh, go ahead, Angela.
Yeah, I was just going to ask. So you never had really any fear around anything that you were seeing?
Oh no, of course I did, but
okay.
But I also, the sketchy ones, of course. I didn't like the experience of having the hairs stand up on the neck and the shivers and all that stuff. I really didn't like that. But if it came to fight or flight, I always had a little bit more fight instinct happening with those things. So it's like, if I thought that like someone was hovering at the edge of my room, if I just wanted to go to sleep, yeah, I'd pull the covers over and kind of lock it down. But otherwise, I'm jumping out and I'm running at them. And so, yeah, there was a lot more of that. Yeah.
I was going to ask, like, how long did that last for? Did that being able to see and kind of interact in some level with them, did that end around 7 years old, or did
No, it kept going. It didn't really lock down. A certain amount of the sensitivity faded, but there was always things still happening. And I really wanted it to be gone. Actually, I wanted it to not be there, because it was just like, oh, why can't I just go to sleep and not ever have something, some being trying to communicate with me or do whatever I wanted, to have that kind of life, but it just wasn't in the cards. So, but I learned how to develop my intellect, and I would actually use that as a means of decreasing my sensitivity. I would do, 2-digit multiplication, or in my mind. I would try to keep my mind so busy that I would lessen the sensitivity to those sorts of things. And I was also trained by, I suppose, kind of people who were, I don't know, loosely in the intelligentsia. Certainly people who had a good education, very rationalistic type of folks. And so, I also thought like, okay, a lot of this stuff, is probably just, my particular biology and my brain making stuff happen. So I'm going to take it with a grain of salt and not really, give it too much credence or more credence than maybe it needed. So, I had that going on as well.
So did you have the experience? Oh, sorry, Linda. Let's ask this real quick. Did you have the experience of then like trying to tell your mom something and she was like, oh, that's just your imagination? Or like, what was your experience along those lines?
Oh, no, not really. It was interesting. I mean, like, I think I really played into my astrology as a kid. I mean, I was much more of a straight up, triple, quadruple Scorpio than I am back then. So like, I would keep things close to my chest that I had no reason actually to keep close to my chest, almost reflexive secrecy, even if there was no, threat or anything. And when we did talk about such subjects, actually, they're quite open-minded. They weren't, lockdown materialist reductionists, especially my father. In many ways, my father was very open-minded about stuff. And I think my mother had shared that she'd felt different spirits and at different times, maybe. And if they did say your imagination, actually imagination in the context of my upbringing was actually kind of an elevated term. It wasn't just your imagination. It was imagination is a special thing. And if you've got it, it's almost like having the knack. And so there was a real celebration of anybody who had a certain amount of creative openness. And so I was very lucky in that, even if I thought this is my imagination, it was actually, let's have more of it. Let's not shut it down. So I really appreciate my parents and my older sister that they created this wonderful cocoon where you could kind of have a lot of room cognitively and epistemologically to develop. It's like I could watch In Search of all I wanted, but the funny thing, my dad would come in and make fun of the In Search of show. I don't know if you ever remember that with Leonard Nimoy. It was like the precursor to Ancient Aliens and all these other things, but their line on In Search of was like, some have said, blank, 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 of course. And my dad would say, like, some have said, to make fun of it, anybody could be making that claim. So that's just an illustration of how they provided this kind of balance, which was just great. So I'm not like a lot of the people I've met who had to like lock themselves down, shut it down, hold it in. If I wanted to, I probably could have talked a whole lot more, at least in my nuclear family, about these sorts of things. Yeah.
What were you going to say, Linda? Were we going to ask?
Well,
something?
you asked what I was going to ask. How
okay.
Responded to them. Because mine did the opposite. Mine shut it down quick. Yeah, mine really shut it down, saying if you go to school talking about things like this, people are going to think you're crazy. So I went through my whole life thinking, if I talk about this, people will think I'm crazy.
Now we know.
The great thing was people.
Now we know I am
crazy.
It's out of the bag. There's nothing to do about it.
How wonderful! And I bet part of your life has been, you getting to reclaim and own that, reclaim the,
absolutely.
The bits of
it's so refreshing. There are still things like I know now because of this show, I'll never be in public office again. I won't. Those dreams are gone. I won't ever be a politician making things happen, but I'll be in some other aspect making things happen. So,
yes.
it's weird that was something I actually thought of at one point in my life.
No, I thought of that too. I thought I was going to be a politician.
Yeah.
I was coming in a very political family. I was very interested. And when I was 9, I was in 1992 or 3, I was on a bus with a friend, and I thought, what's my first year of eligibility to be like 2020 when I'm 37? And my platform for my 2020 election was going to be something called the Green New Deal, which is exactly what they're doing now. I figured like they're never going to get rid of trickle down economics and Reaganomics. It's still going to be a problem by the time I'm 37, sadly, and the environmental problem won't be taken care of. So we need to come up with a policy suite that addresses both of these things. And so, but yeah, I made the same choice. After the NDE, I was like, oh my God, I have to go around and, being careful about what I say. It's just not my cup of tea.
It's not going to happen. Yeah. I mean, but I sit there and think, how much better would our world be if people like us were politicians instead of the ones that we have?
Well, maybe you.
I don't know. Just okay, a mix of people, but a mix of people.
Well, yeah, I think that's the new world that's being birthed. Is like that's why we're here, is because we're supposed to be the meta beyond. We're not here to be normal. We're here to have both left and right brain, as you say, Linda. Like have this both in harmony as opposed to trying to shut things down and be in control. Hop in, Miss Angela.
Yeah, I was just going to echo what you just said, that balance, carrying the balance into being, operating. And that's what would benefit us most in terms of government structure, Yeah.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot to be said about self-governance and being able to master your reality from within.
Right.
So NDE, you've said it, let's talk about it. It wasn't actually an NDE, but it was NDE related. And it's also, it's couched in this huge loss as well. So why don't you just go ahead, I'll toss you the mic, Mr. Ishtar, and let us know, Ambassador Ishtar, and let us know, about that experience that you had.
Yeah, well, it was interesting. I was 13, and in some ways, and it sounds kind of funny to say it, but I love both my parents quite a bit. Maybe and also especially my mother. I spent lots of time with her. We had a very good connection. But in some way, like when I was a kid, I didn't fully trust either of them. not that they gave me any reason to, but just a general thing. And so it was when I was 13, I was starting to trust her more, which was interesting. And as that was happening, I kind of, it just came suddenly the night before we had an accident. It just came in like lightning out my mouth, basically, without even thinking about what I was going to say. Are you going to die soon? And it, there was a sort of thrust and power in those words that I felt, and I could tell my mom was really, momentarily sort of stunned by them, which was atypical because she was it's like she's a very sort of stout person, and in many ways. And so kind of went by that, and I went to bed, woke up the next morning in a very unusual manner, because kind of flipped up. And as my mother and father were passing my my bedroom door to go on their like 6 a.m. walk that they did in those days, and I just was like shouting as soon as I woke up into my body. It was like, there's something I got to tell you. And I couldn't remember what the damn message was. And I was so distraught at not, like, well, God, it's like I had a message, like I was the guy at Marathon, and I forgot all about what I'm supposed to say. And so they had to calm me down for like 5 minutes. Just took them 5 minutes to kind of, I was really amped up. And then I was like, okay, just going to go to school like any normal day. It was like second to last day of school. I had a big awards ceremony. I went home with a lot of, like a box of stuff, which was very exciting for me. I liked getting awards as a 7th grader. And I came home and spent some time chilling with my mom, and kind of some irony, sad irony. My sister was going to go to her new job, which was in a movie theater at the edge of town, sort of a brand new place. And my mom was like, "Oh, that road's not safe. I don't want you biking, to work and back on that road. So I'm going to take you." And so we went, and we were actually on the way to the hospital because I'd also broken my arm the night before playing baseball. And, we were heading to the same hospital where we ended up. And after we dropped my sister off, we pulled across and we got hit by a car going at a very high speed, in a much bigger car, a heavier car than the little Chevy Cavalier that we were driving in. And, I was just turning, my mother had requested, this is all minutia, probably no one wants to hear, but my mother had requested, will you put in the Luther Vandross tape? And it's like, I'd heard this Luther Vandross tape like way too many times. As a 7th, I was like, oh God, once more. And it's like, and I was about to, try to negotiate for something different, and as I turned to enter those negotiations, there was this big car just like right about to hit us. I mean, like right there. And so everything else that followed was just an automatic process, but one I wasn't expecting. I would have expected myself to freak out and tighten up and be really afraid. But instead, I did think, oh shit, which is kind of like a universal reaction. And then it's as if I started descending this vast well inside me, this vast kind of shaft into like a very deep, coherent, peaceful zone. On the way down the shaft, I was actually, I thought this was it. Like, okay, this life's over. And it's like, man, I really did think that this life was going to go more than 13 years. I had this suspicion that this is this the script? Okay, I guess this is a script. I didn't know this was the one. And then we had the life review, which I'd been fascinated by for years, since hearing of the phenomena. And it just sounded amazing. I didn't think any such thing was really possible to, in such a small bit of time, to have a completely detailed view of every single moment of your life, but also from an expanded perspective. I was like, what is that? And there we are. And I was connected with this just completely objective strata of consciousness that I had known at different points in my life. Usually when I touched it, I would sometimes recoil away from it, because sometimes it would happen in moments. I'd have this, what I thought was a brilliant plan, and this kind of Jiminy Cricket, or giant Jiminy Cricket, would say like, I don't think that's a good idea, and I'd be like, oh, shut it, and then I'd go and do my thing, and it was actually a very bad idea. Just like say, but here I was feeling like I was touching that field and coming into oneness with it. And by the end of the near-death, this life review, I realized, oh God, that's been me the whole time, but just a vaster me than I'd known. I'd just been alienated temporarily from this vaster consciousness. And we went through every moment, and kind of and anywhere where I was holding on, or where I had a grudge against somebody, or a regret, or everything was forgiven. and everything was washed, and everything was seen for what, basically seen as love. You put it into words. Every moment, the life, the universe, and everything that had ever transpired was seen as this emanation of some kind of vast wholeness. And I couldn't have used these words I'm using at the time. I just didn't have the vocabulary. But love. And by the end of the life review, 13 years, takes even fewer milliseconds than 50 years probably. There I was, just looking at the dashboard, looking at this car just about to hit us, the sky in the distance. And I was looking at everything. I was like, oh my God, I'm everywhere. This is that. This is it. Wow, wow, wow. No words. I and thou, and these distinctions were smashed. They weren't there. It was like I had a suit, slid off me that I had no idea I was wearing. And the suit was very ill-fitting. And the suit was some little biographical self with likes and dislikes and all these memories and blah, 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 blah. You never see anything because you're just looking at this, and it was gone. And then boom, and I remember very, very hard impact and a big jerking movement to my right side, and really whacking my head on the door and parts of the door. Over there, I was knocked out from that concussed, and then waking up with the paramedics using like those giant skill saw type things to get the doors open. And I remember them. I was thinking, I didn't think much because I was concussed. I didn't know what my name was. I didn't know my age or much. I knew that was my mother. It's pretty much all I knew. And I knew that the paramedics were, oh, wow, they're doing a really good job, was one of the thoughts, because I was like, wow, I'd never been handled like that before. My body so skillfully. It's like they were really good at, making sure I didn't get a spine injury and stuff like that, and just being pulled out on a gurney and put into a back of an ambulance. And I had what a lot of people have. I was at the top of the ambulance looking down, and in my eye sockets looking up. And it was very, I suppose if I had the word trippy at that time, I would say it was a trippy experience, but I was still sort of bathed in this kind of mycelial consciousness, that was underneath everything. So there was still that sense of being in the gurney, or in the car, in the EMT, in my mother's body, which I could feel was over there. I couldn't look because they had the neck locked down in one of those things. And then my mother called my name out twice, and each time I told her that I was okay. And I don't think she registered the first response, but she certainly registered the second response. And that's when I felt her breathing completely changed, because before she was really, really struggling. And then her breathing went down into a very even sort of letting go mode. And I didn't put two and two together in the ambulance. I felt like we were like as if our souls or our consciousness, or the non-physical part of me that was hovering at the top. There was, when her voice spoke, it was as if I could feel that we were kind of, in a sense, intimately connected. It was a very interesting experience that I hadn't had a lot, of as a child, except very early maybe. And then I felt her also kind of become more diffuse, almost as if she was going off. I didn't think that meant she was going to die. I just figured, I wasn't figuring anything because I was, pretty stupid in that gurney. And before I knew it, we were parked at the hospital. They were pulling us out. We were wheeled in. We're in this, hospital room. She's over behind curtains. I'm out because I guess they figured I was all right, though they still had me locked down in case I had spine injuries or anything like that. And then Dad came out and told us kids. My sister had been picked up by my dad. I think that your mother's gone, and so then it was just one thing leads to the next. It's kind of not really a blur because I actually remember it very well, but everything just moves. One continuous moment out the hospital, and it was being picked up by dear family friends, taken home, and then anybody I think has like several days in which it's just like a mushy kind of grief where there ain't no up and there isn't any down, and all the structures of your life are just completely not there that had been there previous. And I think that lasts way more than just a few days. So that I thought was that. I was, again, scientifically minded, even though I did believe in psychic phenomena. And I figured like a lot of the stuff that I was experiencing probably was proper psychic phenomena, but I wasn't gonna, bet the farm on it. I still suspected that I never encountered anything writing about these kind of other experiences that I was having, the sense of being everywhere. I never really encountered that before. It wasn't so much in the psychic, stuff you would watch on TV in the 90s. And I'd never read any books on sort of, Tibetan yogis and, or Vedanta philosophy or more mystical sorts of things. So I just figured I had shock, because it felt like, I certainly did have shock as well. And so, then the shock just kind of hung around for a long time. And then I started to think it was a very different sort of shock, because, at the same time that I was like really just having all the, stages of grief, like Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, basically outlined, almost according to her textbook, I was also feeling like I had this giant silence that I couldn't shake. It wouldn't go. And it was in there and it was everywhere. And sometimes I would be more in like a point consciousness only, but still silence. Other times I would modulate to being this feeling like, oh my God, wow, this is really very, I didn't know the word non-local then, but that would be the word I'd use to describe it now. And when I would play in that thing, I could also put extra attention into it, sort of rest back into it. Joy and bliss would flood through my body. Like, wow, all this time I was also thinking like, this this shock thing is the best biological mechanism. I need more shock, not less. Sort of thinking like, this is great. And there was one time I remember I was gonna, ask my dad like, are you experiencing this bliss? And then I said like, I think maybe wisely I said like, shut that down. I was like, I actually wanted to. I had this instinct. It was almost like thinking of yourself as another person. I was thinking like, his psychology needs some time and space from the adults. The adults will come in and muck this up. He needs to kind of, not, bring them into this world. He needs the freedom and the space to explore this, because they ain't experiencing this. So I didn't even attempt to communicate with just anybody else really. Just kind of playing with this, and I went back to school at the end of summer, and I wasn't like some perfect mystic or anything. I wasn't some enlightened being, but I think I was waltzing very innocently into a lot of spaces that, if they were stabilized, maybe people would say that's an enlightened being, or whatever the hell. I was still a teenager, a 13-year-old who'd lost their mother, but at the same time I had this whole other end of the spectrum there. And then I went back to school and it kind of faded away. And I think it was probably wise. I remember a few people had, kind of noticed that there was something different in me, and and they weren't perceiving it as me being kind of fucked up. They were thinking like, what's that? How? And how did that come about? And all I could think of, well, you should just get yourself in a car accident, and just get really close to death and don't die, and you too shall. And then of course saying those words, I was like, yeah, that's not a very good that's a sketchy strategy. But that's what I was doing. Also, I was jumping off of heights that I knew wouldn't kill me, but I figured would scare me. And I was jumping out of moving vehicles, and I had access also. A friend had a golf cart. And we were like, let's get it up to 10 miles per hour, see what happens there. Not enough. Can we get it to 20? And like, I remember once jumping out at 20, and I landed, and I didn't know to roll at that speed. So I like landed straight, and I thought, this is great. And then I experienced, Newton's wonderful mechanism, and and I thought I broke my other arm, and I was like, okay, we're gonna, we're gonna get in trouble, with Dad if we, break bones because of these experiments. So we're gonna find
trying to
another way.
almost kill ourselves. There might be negative repercussions.
I got
Scorpio, Catman Scorpio,
right.
Hop in, Angela.
Yeah. So here's my question. It's kind of two-part. So it's like you had a baseline for the otherness of life, the non-physical aspects of life. And through this incident, you got another level of understanding. You got a deeper level of understanding of this non-physical aspect of life. How did you go about the integration of the two sides of those things? Like how, because it seems like there was a struggle, there's a period in which you had to understand it almost. And how did you bridge the gap between the baseline that you had and the deeper level that you actually got a chance to experience? How did you bridge those two together? Second question is, was there ever a point when you put the two together and actually were able to contact your mother or open to the presence of your mother through bridging the gap between the two?
Okay, good questions. Okay, first part, I would say probably in as messy and an unelegant way as you possibly could. I was also fighting back, it's like, it's kind of, I was pulled out of the space and I didn't even know exactly what was the mechanics of it. And maybe that would have been a little bit helpful to have a bit of that at the end. But, I went back to school and I felt, okay, I got to try to pick up Thomas Ward Howell, my birth name. I got to pick up the old trajectory of this guy. And I tried. And I really was trying, I wasn't like, I was born not to be some just selfish guy. There were other stakeholders in my life, like my dad, like my grandparents, the rest of my family. I felt that I needed to, in some ways, be the son that my mother would have wanted. And there was all these other considerations and also my own, I think, cowardice, just straight up without those things. I was like, oh my God, like there really was a sense of, I was, looking over an edge into an abyss. And, so I was also homegrown, a little bit of afraid of that. So I tried to put the old clothes back on. I was miserable. And a lot of people thought I wasn't miserable. Because I was very good at not seeming miserable, perhaps, and maybe hard to read from a lot of people, and so it took me, I think, my 8th grade year and about 2.5, 3 years into high school to kind of gradually, with fits and starts, come to a place where I was ready to embrace what over time I started to call the crazy monk. And it's not like I was possessed by something, but it was like my heart, my deep heart, my soul was wild and wasn't interested in politics and wasn't interested necessarily in making the kind of contributions to the world that my family and the community, broader community, thought of as contributions. It wanted, would hear the word monk and there would be this just great excitement and joy. And finally, I walked into a metaphysical bookstore early on, and I was never interested in going into metaphysical bookstores. Really, I didn't even know what was in them. I just see like candles and incense in the windows and chimes and be like, the hell I want to go in there for? But my sister wanted to get some stuff, and I went in the back, opened up a book, and turned to a page, and it started talking about experiences that were exactly like what I'd been going through. And then I was hooked, and so that lasted a little bit. But I watched. Eventually, like I remember watching Brother Sun, Sister Moon at about the right time. This is the story of Saint Francis, and watching his conversion scene, which is really a beautiful scene. Shot in Italy, and he takes off all his clothes and gives them to his parents, and he walks out into this sunset because he's wants to consider the lilies of the field and the birds in the sky and live like them and take that part of the New Testament rather seriously. And that just pierced me, absolutely. I mean, I don't really have a Catholic bone in my body, but if that Saint Francis in film was Catholicism, then I would be like Francis, but just in a different way, not part of the church. And so I started meditating very, very seriously. At a certain point, I had to go all the way. I felt it was actually my duty You know, to the world. I felt like if a person has the calling and they know it's their calling, then they ought to follow it, even if it gets them into practical trouble, even if it means they're a pauper. If you know it's your calling, you have to do it. And because I thought of the whole world as like an orchestra with, you know, different people, or a play, different people have different lines. And so the goal to me and my thinking was, well, you got to play your part all out, you know, and that's, you know, that would be, and everybody has their own contribution. I thought, like, I guess mine's to be a crazy monk. You know, okay, we'll do that, whatever that means. The second question about my mom, I'll illustrate this with, because I did want to reconnect, but it didn't seem to be wanting to happen. And I kind of knew, like, oh no, I would get sort of a message back, you know, which, again, I was always skeptical of these things, saying that to the audience just so they know what I was like. But I get the message back, like, no, you're fine. You're good. You've got every, and I remember going to this Meet Your Spirit Guide class that was at came through my local metaphysical bookstore, and it went there, gave us a method to do, you know, kind of a guided meditation, that their thing. I ended up going up this tube that was at the top of my head. It was a very visceral experience, not something like imagination. I was like, whoa, you know, I went up and it was like, I came in, I interrupted some card game that was going on. Not like an actual card game, but I say card game because it had the feeling of like, here are these three guides chilling around a table. I show up and they're like, they look at me like, what? And I was like, yeah, I gotta, you know, meet you guys, you know, and they're like, yeah, you're good. And that goes for your mom too. You're fine. You don't need to see any of us. You know, just keep following that trajectory that you're on and use the tools that you have at your disposal. And I was like, okay, you know, then I went down and, you know, shared with the kind of the course leaders, and but yeah, I was a little bit frustrated with answers like that, but actually, you know, that was such a strong experience. I was like, yeah, I guess they're right, you know. So that was that. Actually, contact with mother really didn't come in until years later, and years after being in an ashram. You know, and maybe one of the most profound ones was right in the middle of my meditation teacher training, and this was a program where we would be meditating with our eyes closed. Depending on when you fall asleep or how much you sleep, you could be straight up meditating like 8 to 14 hours a day, which was very easy, not at all boot camp, because it's like an effortless, pleasurable method. And I was like, it was never a challenge. It was like so much fun. The time would just go by and be like, oh, is it dinner time already? And I remember one day I got up to go to the bathroom and, you know, finish washing my hands and look up at the mirror in front of the sink. And there in my face, and it wasn't just like poetic, this wasn't scary at all, but there was my mother's face and my face, and not just the biological resemblance. It was, you know, wasn't exactly my face. It was also her face too, in a certain sense. It was a little bit different. And there was just such a sense of kind of, we couldn't have talked to each other because we were the same being in that space. But if we could have talked to each other, if I could have been hearing from her, it was essentially a message of, you did it. You know, it's like, you did it. And it was very profound. I didn't cry or anything. I was in such a joy spot that didn't register in the body, but there was a sense of wholeness in my torso. Such a sense of a lot of weight, little weights that I didn't know were there, falling off, and like you had a bunch of combination locks tied to you, and all of a sudden their cords were cut to them. And that was, you know, that was a very moving moment.
That is
I'm really curious. For me, my mother still comes through, but my mother her personality still comes through a lot, which was quite stern. Like, Linda, get out of bed. Will come up. She didn't wake me up this morning, but yeah, sometimes that will come through. But there are other times that, you know, I will be very aware of her energy, her presence near me. Not so much my dad. He only came in when I was really, really sick one time, and I could smell him. I would smell him coming in.
Wow.
And feel him. And I actually felt the end of the bed go down once. or I could feel like him sitting at the end of the bed when I was really sick.
Mm.
That was about the only time I saw him. Do you ever still like feel her presence externally or internally?
Yeah, about a year ago, I was driving home. I think it was about a year ago, 6 months maybe. I have to look back in my records, but I was driving home on the dirt road that from the grocery store. So this is like the most normal Portuguese countryside location you could get. And I was, I wasn't driving fast, got driving kind of slow, and I had this instinct that I had to turn around and look over my right shoulder. I don't know why, just like wasn't a noise, but I looked around and this was interesting, because sitting in the back seat of my car, like arm in arm with each other, like with just the biggest laughing grins on their faces, and happier than I experienced either of them in their physical lives, was my mother and her mother, my grandmother, and my grandmother had passed away, like a year and a half before this experience. I'd had some dreams of my grandmother as if I was sort of like going through the bardo with her a little bit as kind of an attendant at night, saying like, hey, okay, now you're going to do this, I'm going to do this. And there they were. And it was this beautiful sense of wholeness and reconciliation. I mean, they got on, but of course, like any family, that, issues and stuff, passes between. Theirs were quite mild comparatively. But there they were, I couldn't see through them. So I couldn't see the seat behind them. They were not transparent at all. They had that sort of the heat line effect type thing around their bubble. There was a kind of a goldish, whitish sort of light around the edges. Then there's like sparkles, but I couldn't see through them. It wasn't like, this will-o'-the-wisp transparency that I could chalk up to my imagination. And they were there for like basically a full-on 2.5 to 3 seconds. Like I slowed the car down, but I know the road so well, and there's never really any cars. So I wasn't, going to endanger. I didn't have to turn my head away. So I just kind of put the brakes on. They were there. And then after, and I could tell they were communicating a lot with me, not through words, but just through their presence. There was like, oh, okay. And they were, kind of also giving me sort of a, good job of going the black sheep route, basically like, yeah, you were right. And it was really more, and so then they popped out, and there was like a loud snapping sound, like, I can't make it very well, but it was, and then they were gone, and I was like, okay, I guess I'm gonna drive the rest of the way home. Take the groceries home. Now I was like, all right, well, that was cool. So yeah, there've been other times, but it's kind of been like, the guidance was, get your ass to a monastery. That was the big hurdle. That was the big ask, which I had to internally actually use a lot of scorpionic will to affect, to achieve. And so, yeah, the experiences of mom on the other side have been a cherry on top. And she's always kind of been almost a transcendent, I'm clean of the personality stuff, mom. And there's always been a sense of I'm kind of doing a lot of things that she kind of wanted to do. Like, I think if a few tweaks were made in her life plan, she may have gone and gotten deeply involved. If she lived longer, she might have actually too. She was being a counseling psychologist, and if they start discovering Jung, look out. But she may have gone in some of those directions, maybe not as intensely. So there's always been a sense of kind of taking, in a very authentic to me way, living out some of her aspirations for herself that were unlived. And I remember a beautiful time walking up Giotto's bell tower in Florence, which is this just giant, beautiful marble tower, which is right next to the cathedral in Florence. And I'd been, primed. This was on my honeymoon with my wife, Luna. My wife got hurt in a freakish sort of way. She like seriously sprained her ankle. And she's like, we got to get you home. But she's like, you got to climb this tower. It's like, yeah. She's like, I'm going to go sit over here. It won't make a difference if I just sit for a few minutes and rest. You got to climb that tower. I've been training, climbing lots of stairs in Portland to make sure that I'd really climb all these European towers with some ease. I wouldn't like die of a heart attack or some shit like that. And I as I was climbing it, and I really, my training paid off. I was like, man, I am going up. I realized it's such a narrow staircase. My mother climbed up this thing in 1970 or 71 or whenever she went. And as soon as that thought came into my mind, I felt this just sense of being hugged in such a profound way. And yeah, it makes me cry now. I start crying. And I felt this sort of, it's a scent that I can't put words to. That I know that sounds vague. Welcome to Woo Woo YouTube live streams, everybody. But a scent you can't put words to. And no, I was not, taking herbal medicine or anything like that. But I just knew it was her scent. A sound you can't put words to. All there, completely like halfway into my body, and it stayed with me because I only had a few like steps left till I get to this observation deck. And when I got there, I looked at this beautiful sunset over the rooftops of Florence and the Arno River, and I just wept, because I was, that was actually something that I recall that was something my mother always told me, her personality mom, like when you graduate high school or college or something like that, we're going to go and go to some of these places. I went in 1970 or 71, whatever the year was. So that was another reunion kind of experience.
So beautiful that she facilitated that with you, and she was like, and we still went, baby. Like we still went, we still got to see it. And she was like hugging you and guiding you. That's so wonderful. Your mom's energy is so vast and warm and embracing. I wanted to talk to you about meditation and this stuff, because what you're able to do, because you're like, 18 hours of meditation, it was so relaxing. And I'm like, and for a lot of us, it's like, okay, was that 20 minutes? Oh, that was
yeah.
And I think that there's this, and yes, you have a perk of coming in with maybe a greater awareness that stayed intact with you. And so, you got a little bit of a leg up there, but at the same time, the whole point is that it's available to everybody. Like no matter where you're at, it's not like, oh, you're special, you can meditate. It's like, this is something that is here for all of us. And I think it's a matter of deconstructing our personality enough, or deconstructing our mind enough to allow that greater self to emerge, and for the small I to recede. You talk.
I might agree with you there, but I disagree with that actually, to a certain extent. To that take, I think it's true to a certain extent, and I do think that there's all sorts of little variables, and there's bell curves for lots of different dispositional tendencies. But that said, I actually think it comes down to there's a lot of shit methodologies out there, or like relatively bad or ineffective meditations for the most part, are the things that I think get popular. And usually I don't say that. I don't even necessarily think that
meditation. What's some shit meditation? Just so
that's a thing.
Just things to watch out for. Maybe things to watch out for.
Can I rephrase that? Can I rephrase that? Because this is Kat's kind of nailing it, because we have this conversation. The squirrels run around me as I try to meditate and jump on my head, and and so I struggle a bit with it. And so for those of us that do struggle meditating, what method would you recommend? What would you recommend that we do? That's a different.
Yeah, no, well, I have to walk back. I don't like to be chauvinist towards my particular methodology or the family of methodologies. But that said, sometimes I am a little bit like Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, who's maybe a little bit, of transcendental meditation fame. I'm a little bit downriver of that sort of meditation. He, we kind of, I think, really jokingly say like, "Oh my God, Buddhist meditation so difficult," and yet I have a lot of friends who have had wonderful, profound experiences in all sorts of methodologies. Personally, I started out doing a mix of sort of mindfulness type stuff, which there's a lot of different things, Vipassana, and also straight up concentration meditations. And it was difficult. At least from my disposition, it was difficult. I was a watch checker. I'd say like, okay, 20 minutes for this one. I'd be like, have to look at the watch, like 90 seconds. I'd be like, oh shit. So at least for me, it worked much better. I got hooked into an effortless meditation that didn't involve a whole lot of visualization. So I'm not a fan of a lot of moving parts in a meditation practice. If I have to like fucking remember some guru in one of my chakras, which is part of Kriya Yoga, and as I'm doing all these other things, and it's coordinated with the breath, I'm like, Jesus Christ, that's just too much. I was given like very simple, effortless mantra-based training, and I think for me, two different methodologies, which are both effortless, have worked very well. The Ishayas Ascension one, I'd never really heard of it much before. I didn't expect it to work because of these little phrases which invoke appreciation, gratitude, and love, and which are used like mantras. You drop them, you let them take your mind inward. That worked beautifully for me. I would fall into, I would use the word achieve back then because it's very type A, but I would, when I was young, achieve a certain amount of samadhi with the concentration stuff, but usually it amounted to me exhausting myself until I couldn't try anymore. And then I found myself in this beautiful vastness. That was what I experienced after the car accident. It's kind of what I was trying to get back to. But then I learned this ascension thing. And I did the work that used to take me like 4 freaking hours at night of meditation. It did it in like 2 minutes for me, the first 2 minutes. And I was like, oh God, this is great. You mean I could just, this is natural. I just need to find kind of the ideal banana for my own nervous system. And this is it. I also have done transcendental meditation. And that's different. That uses Sanskrit bija mantras. There's also people who teach it outside of the aegis of the TM organization. They call it other things for legal purposes. But I have found that kind of effortless mantra meditation to be very useful. In general, I do think that if we could someday study in a kind of a rigorous scientific way, what are the more universally effective for the largest amount of people meditation types, I do think the effortless ones will probably be at the top of the heap, and some of the ones that involve more concentration and visualization will kind of be not as effective, especially as something to get somebody to start someone with, because now I can do all sorts of meditations and they all work because there's been this kind of immersion in samadhi, because the brain has been changed. So you could do a whole lot of things and it becomes a meditation, but I would never suggest those for people.
Can you define samadhi for us so people who don't have that word know what you're talking about?
Yes. Well, now most people won't hear this Christian term because it's actually kind of esoteric even within Christianity, but it's also means the peace that passes all understanding. But samadhi is a beautiful Sanskrit word, which could be translated to flawless evenness, and it's basically pointing to I think the deepest depth of Maslow's peak experience, the experience where that any human can have, where the thoughts about the future fall away, thoughts about the past fall away, where the sense of I and thou becomes, kind of falls away. You find yourself in awareness without a second. There's a sense of just wholeness, quiet, which is where the flawless evenness word
Flawless
comes
what?
in.
Evenness?
Flawless evenness is one way you can literally translate samadhi into English. So that the waves have stilled. If you read like the first chapter of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, which is sort of like the formational document or text of yoga in a sense, spends a lot of time giving different definitions for the same thing. It's like, here's another angle you could define the state as, or when the objects of the mind, thoughts, come to rest. Now, the wonderful thing is that this is not mutually exclusive with having thoughts, which is where I think a lot of traditions have got things a bit ass backwards. And now that's what's presented as you need to have a completely still mind. And then you can experience that. But rather, actually, I found one of the interesting things, actually, in my first meditation class with Ascension was that I was in the silence. It was blissful, wonderful. And then like up here at the top of the swimming pool, like if you were at the bottom of the swimming pool, you can still see the waves and the activity up there. I could see little thoughts and little perceptions floating by, but I could see them with clarity, and yet they were not gripping my attention at all. My attention was just, instead of, it was taking up the whole spectrum. Resting down here, everything could be seen. That is one flavor of samadhi. I mean, some sticklers, like in the comment section, this guy is bastardizing this word, and they're like, no, there's it's just that, there's no I. Yes, that's true. You go into a place where I melts, but
I just wanted to put a pin here. Yeah. So one thing my guides always say is that sometimes we make stuff too hard. We make things so difficult for ourselves when really it's so simple. And what they've guided me toward is just being conscious of the breath, being able to get between the breaths. So focusing on that deep inhale and getting in that place of flawless evenness between the breaths. Stopping in that awareness between the breath, the inhale and the exhale, making it that simple. And in that state, you are in a progressive or a consistent, incessant state of meditation, because you're in an incessant state of awareness of the self. You can bring yourself there at any moment, at any time, in any amount of time that you have available, whether it's a few seconds or an extended period of time. It's just learning to get into that stillness between those breaths. Yeah.
That's beautiful. And in my own personal story, having the breath be a profound vehicle for or a very effective vehicle for that only really opened up after I had to, using mantra meditation for many years, and it could be different ways for different people. So and
just to let people know, I mean, Mr. Man, Ishtar here, does teach meditation. So we have his link down below if you want to reach out to him. It is both one-on-one and group as well. So if you're curious about, what has worked for him and how that works, because I know I get very mental about meditation, it's like, and I had, I had somebody way back in the day kind of wreck meditation for me when I was first learning about it. It was like regimented, and it became very mental, and it was again trying to get meditation right, which is not what meditation is, and I think that being able to have somebody unload that programming around it and give you permission to step into the water without being like, and make sure you wear your snorkel and your flippers, and then also have a rubber duck, like giving you all this weight while you're trying to get into the water.
Now reverse it.
And it's like trying to learn self-mastery on day one. It's like that sort of pressure where it's like, no, that's there's no room for growth there. So I would encourage people to reach out directly to Ishtar. And let's talk about that, your name Ishtar there for a wee bit, because how we did, and I shared this on the little, what I call Eye Bites video, where we talk about this from our pre-show. But I wanted people to, here's what I want to weave this into, is because when you've talked about recognizing yourself as a rather large, like 8 to 10 foot tall being, having this, this easy sense of that's who you were. And in these states of meditation where maybe you've connected back into that being, but you've also connected into other beings on the planet who are experiencing samadhi, the states of blissfulness. And I guess I want to toss that, it's kind of a large scope I pointed to there, but like this blue being that you have experienced and that state of being in samadhi is also, it's a universal experience regardless of the lifetime or incarnation you're tapping into.
Well, yeah, and so a lot of those other things we always treated as kind of, byproducts. We didn't focus on that a lot. We, like our training was always, I'll use my hand as sort of a diagram or example, and just imagine that experiencing presence or the now or samadhi or the Tao is down here, that maybe we live a lot of our lives thinking we're this little fingertip person with all these other separate fingertip people, and we were just constantly let's just focus on that. Like a lot of the folks who were more prone to sort of psychic openings were often sort of like, yeah, that's great, but that this is freedom. That's not freedom. Yeah, freedom comes when, like you can be the whole ocean. You don't just want to be a glorified fancy wave, fancified wave who's special or something like that. Keep going there. But that said, I think the mechanism for those experiences we were talking about is like once one starts to get down there, maybe their baseline starts to be more in this area, or incorporates this area instead of just kind of making visits. Then it's like, oh, you might start accidentally, finding that you're connecting in very interesting ways with all these other fingers, but from the inside out, not from the outside in. And that's how a lot of those experiences have come about and been more prevalent and present in the last few years. And I think the ones, some of the other experiences probably were other lifetime memories of this. But again, I'm very I'm not really attached to the framing of it, because it doesn't really make much of a difference in a certain sense, whether that Roman farmer I'm tapping into is some other lifetime of this, some particular finger pattern, or whether it's just me tapping into the fact that at a certain level each and every one of us is basically Krishna, just playing every part, and then it's null and void. We're like in one of those like Eddie Murphy or Peter Sellers movies where they're basically playing every character. That's kind of how I think of God, is just, I like both of the actors could do that. They just be and sometimes they'd be talking to themselves. And, it's like, yeah, that is what's happening literally at a certain level. You go to the tippy top bottom of the palm. It's like, yeah, that's it. And so yeah, that can be, that sounds like a very strange experience. I can understand. It's like, what are you talking about? What? If we're married, up here, and it's like a very grounded experience. There's just as grounded as you experience that this hand and this hand are kind of part of the same body. It would get really chaotic if we didn't know our left hand was with our body. We'd constantly be scaring ourselves. It's just like that. But thank God nature has, kind of built in, like, yeah, that is kind of like a reflex thing. I think of this other way as kind of like a forgotten reflex thing. And that if we cultivate our nervous system to a certain point, it's like we kind of like, oh yeah, I know that I'm this body and that I probably don't want to put my hand in a wood chipper, even though I feel a oneness with the wood chipper in a weird way. I feel like somehow that I am inside those atoms just as much as I'm inside these atoms. We can differentiate about the wood chipper, but we can also have the sense of, like, oh, okay. And you can even dislike people that you have a sense of like that this is where, like, sometimes the spiritual, within the spiritual community, people try to achieve oneness in what I would consider a completely untenable, superficial way. And outside in, I want to feel good about the other person. No. You have to go to the samadhi. That's where you find the oneness. You're wasting your time going around, even if you can't possibly waste your time, but going around there, you have to just keep going there. And then, then it's like, yeah, you can have serious disagreements and even think that somebody's a war criminal and really ought to go, to The Hague or something like that. And at the same time have a sense, oh yeah, I'm Dick Cheney too, I'm Putin as well. I am whomever
the current villain is. That's being
yeah, because that I, there's a certain way that that I, instead of just being this sort of little biographical thing, kind of has a resonance with a more fundamental sort of sense of beingness, the I am that I am of the Christian Bible, and Hindu Mahavakyas, I am that.
And I think there's a value of being able to balance both and say, like, that's who that character is in this current drama that, that I'm also in. And yet knowing that you're both the actor and the character, it sort of gives you a range of how does my character best, facilitate this, as opposed to getting lost in the character and what my character's reacting to. Like there's more of a range of how you're going to respond within your role, as opposed to it being a reaction. And you get to, as the actor, get to have more of a choice in how you show up, as opposed to a reaction in how you show up.
Right. There's a total looseness that actually reminds me of one of my favorite, I'm gonna butcher it. One of my favorite parts of Chuang-Tzu, that a later Taoist sage comes after Lao Tzu.
We don't know
Chuang
what that
Tzu,
is,
you
so
might say.
butcher away. We'll
Chuang-Tzu,
Chuang-Tzu.
anyways,
I had that for lunch yesterday. It was amazing. We don't know what Chuang-Tzu is.
He's a very wild Taoist teacher who came a few generations after Lao Tzu, who was the purported author of the Tao Te Ching. But Chuang-Tzu has a story which is like, like a drunk man falls off a cart, and since he's completely inebriated and unknowing of his situation, he doesn't break any bones. Imagine what spontaneity with a capital S can do for you. And what he means by spontaneity is imagine how protected you would be from the exigencies of life if you were in the Tao. Which is to say, if you're united with the thing that's moving all the characters, if you're united with the script writer of the play, or the nature with a capital N, if you will. If you think of nature as being the dance and the choreographer of the dance, and neither and both all at the same time. So absolutely, it's like, and you be more of who you're supposed to be. Like a lot of people, and I'm not gonna, because I think that there are some like spiritual teachers out there, probably it is their destiny to talk in a very calm voice and have an orchid right there. And I'm going to use this face. I'm going to pause now and look into your eyes. I'm going to put my hands on my heart. And maybe it is some people's destiny. I think maybe 70% of those people, they're not playing their part. They probably should be swearing. Or maybe they're not even going to be on that stage at all. They're going to be fixing motorcycles. But I think that when people, the more they come into themselves, the more they actually become more particular, because they have that freedom now. It's not really a paradox. It could sound like one, but people become more unique. The bars are off.
I love that.
I really see that coming in as this new phase we're moving into. It's like before you had the secular and you had the spiritual separated within us. And it's about bringing it all in as the whole person, like having that whole experience within us and bringing that into the norm, versus you have to be this outside guru type thing. It's
or anything, like
anything,
if you feel like you have to put a costume on.
It's the
Right.
expectation.
whatever it is. It's bringing it in.
Yeah, it's releasing the labels and our
Yes,
definition
thank
of
you,
what
Angela.
releasing our definition of what those labels are, letting all that shit go, and then just being who we are authentically from the essence of the soul, our soul, like allowing that to express unhindered. That's what it is. Yeah.
Well, and it's just that weird thing of thinking that like in the corporate world, like, well, if you're wearing the suit right, or the pantsuit right, or for whatever that is, and you have your hair the certain way, you're looking the part. And then in the spiritual world, are you looking the part? Like, are you wearing flowy fabric with, like the incense going? And it's like anything that's addicted to, I shouldn't say addicted, anything that is submitting the authentic self in order to be doing it right, that's just still more of the ego dance. Like, my ego loves to impersonate being in the moment. And that's still an impersonation. It's not, anything. It's a contrivance. It's still a contrivance.
Because we all want to be safe. Oh, you hook it back because you're the MC here, and go for it.
Well, no, go ahead, finish your thought.
I don't even remember it now.
All right.
It's
Well,
completely
then I'll
gone.
seize the mic. So I want to hook that back into like being the big blue being, because I love this idea, because I resonate with being a big blue being. You know, there's some part of me that understands that. Like when I paint people, they tend to be blue. And so, you know, when I'm doing my little artistry. But I think that to, you know, the big blue being that you were was having this moment of grief as in the experiencing some form of abandonment, where like either all of his people had left the planet or they had all perished. And it was like, even this big blue being who were like, oh, well, you know, Chris, I always think about how people, you know, myself, I had so many things that I had to let go of. Like, oh, but if you're at that level, you don't experience this. You wouldn't experience grief as being Krishna, you know? And it's like, that's not real. And like, that's part of the experience, is the illusion of separation, even though, you know, like there was grief in losing your mother. We know we're not separate, but yeah, there is a separation.
Yeah.
And being able to just bring it back to the experience of, no matter what you are, you experience all of the, you don't get away with not having life. Life is all of the flavors, you know. That's, I don't know if that was gonna in particular, other than I wanted to like bring in the big blue being again, I guess.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask you also with that, you know, when you were experiencing that loss, was there, as a big blue being, because you experienced it when you were like 7 and you experienced it when you were 13, and then you had a Samadhi experience of being that entity who went through the loss. Do you know what that was? Can you speak to what he was losing and what he had lost and the resolution of that?
Oh, not exactly. Yeah, to fill everyone in, probably who may have not watched the pre-show chat, from which this is coming, you know, this was, you know, something tied into the discussion of the name I was given in the particular context of it. Why it actually kind of made sense to me was because as a child I had two. There were 2 times that I woke with a night terror. And in each of those times, it was the same dream, exactly playing. One when I was 6, about to go into the 1st grade. Another when I was 13, sort of right in the middle of middle school or about to go in. And then a 3rd time, but the first 2 produced night terrors. And the scene was, you know, being a very, very tall being with bluish skin in sort of a long grassland, almost looked like Mongolia or Wyoming, if Wyoming had taller green grass, sort of hills and that sort of stuff. And there was, I was looking up at the sky in this dream, and it was as if the sky was made out of grief. And it was almost like a sense of being crushed by an emotion that was so vast that it was impossible to take, which is why I couldn't finish the dream. And I woke up to my own screams with my family members holding my body down, and the lights on in my bedroom. But the 3rd time I went through this dream, but I was able, in my meditation teacher training, but I was able to go through the reel of film. It's like a reel of film, basically. I was able to finish the damn movie, and there was because I was doing it with a lot of meditation now under the belt. There wasn't the tension or the stresses there, probably been cleaned out of the nervous system, so I could go through it. And I just think that whoever this, if this was another person, you know, if I'm going to interpret it that way, whoever I was or this was, you know, had realized, oh, you know, the love has been inside me the whole time. You know, I didn't, you know, I'm not really alone, etc., etc. You know, that's why it wasn't perturbing, because it was just peace, you know, just experiencing the whole film from this deep kind of reservoir of peace. And it's like, it's great, you know, it's fine. And I've never had the dream since. So, you know, I kind of take that as a sign that, you know, for whatever reason, you know, that was paralleling events in my life and stuff.
Just John, and I probably just harping on it too much because I'm always drawn back to it. I think because I have a parallel to it. with my own thing. And I just wonder if, like, as the blue being, if that was the first experience that being had of separation, because this realm is the density where you can experience separation. So I'm just like wondering if that was the first encounter of being somebody who had only known oneness that experienced separation in such a visceral, overwhelming way. And it was like the exact opposite of what's always been, you know, and dipping into separation and then coming back out of it. You know, there's something, you know, there's like a richness to pain sometimes.
It could be. I've never really thought of it, but it could be the case. I know there's this really wonderful enlightened fellow in Fairfield, Iowa, named Harry Alto, and he was kind of born with unity consciousness, and he remembers like falling into separate self-consciousness as the dominant one for like 5 minutes or something, or 10 minutes, and he's like, my God, I couldn't handle it. You know, like, how can everybody handle this? And you know, then he, you know, kind of, you know, dip back out of it. At least that's the story he tells. So maybe it's something like that. But you know, I don't know. You know, I don't.
Yeah, no, it's all good. I think that's just me being a little indulgent there, and I'll steer us into some other conversations here. Let's talk about astrology and permaculture. Let's go into where you got into astrology and why that became relevant for you, and what your work is with that.
Oh, okay. Well, childhood, actually, originally, funnily, from my mother, who didn't really subscribe that deeply to any of that stuff. But you know, at a certain point, you know, she read out the descriptions of Scorpio, pros and cons, and I was like, oh, good God. Yeah. And I read the other pros and cons of, you know, the other signs. Like, nah, that's not how I'm wired. I'm wired like this one over here, you know, and it's actually a very particular sign. So it's, so I find, and, you know, I don't know, it's just sort of on the back burner. I didn't really study it with any kind of depth during my school years. And, you know, wasn't all that interested in that, because I figured it was ancillary during my meditation. Ashram years, I just wanted to be really focused and just let's focus on the unmanifest. We don't need to focus on, you know, the structure of the personality so much. And then it was in like 2015, we were walking down the street in Vancouver, British Columbia, and we noticed a fellow in the window who was giving astrology readings and also did tarot readings. And you know, we connected with him, and it turned out he'd actually had a background in Zen Buddhism and meditation, and still continued for 40 years. I thought, well, what a strange combination. You never usually find these, you know, sort of like slightly rigid Zen folks in this kind of like loose, you know, woo-woo, you know, end of the pool. And, you know, we became fast friends, and I eventually learned astrology from him. And then I just sort of dove in and studied all the books on the syllabus he, you know, printed out for me, just really jumped in and found that I really enjoyed reading birth charts, and I was really connecting to it like a musical language, and you know, kind of in a visceral sort of way. And it really was a medium which seemed to augment the intuitive faculties which were already there. And there was just kind of a sense, oh, you're supposed to do this, you know, and actually I didn't like that, because I thought, like, oh, I'm already a disreputable enough character doing this meditation stuff, you know, and being in my benign cult. And now I'm going to add this, like astrologers are just like terrible critical thinkers, et cetera, et cetera. It's still true. But, you know, Luna was saying like, oh, you know, Luna's often right. My wife, Luna, she's, you know, intuits these things, avenues I'm going to end up going down. She's saying, no, I think you're going to actually end up being an astrologer, maybe a really good one. It'd be a really good thing for you to do. And I was like, yeah, but you know, it's like all the reasons I just said. And then I was like, okay, yeah, I think that's right. Because it was also coming from my heart too. It was saying like, you should do astrology and you should get into psychic work. And I was like, okay, I'll do astrology, but fuck the psychic work, because that's like a bridge too far as well. And so, you know, then I started giving birth chart readings for my coworkers. You know, you work for a sandwich and a chai or something like that for a while, you know, your friends. And then I was like, you know what, maybe I will go pro, you know, as Hunter S. Thompson said, when the going gets weird, the weird turn pro. And, you know, we
I love that.
just went for that. And you know, I was finding, you know, I'm always wary of confirmation bias, which is the big bugbear of astrology and similar things. And a lot of people, whatever, know that the moon does not mean that for you. I'm sorry, but that's another thing. Let's get disciplined here, you know. But I started, you know, kind of seeing things in birth charts about people that I was like, okay, I don't know this person from Adam. I don't know anything about their life. I decided all these things before I saw them to have kind of subtle body language, you know, be an avenue of telling me things like, and that's a little bit too specific to be confirmation bias. So either something in the astrology is working, or the psychic stuff is working, irrespective of the methodology that I learned over here. So that intrigued me. You know, and some of the stuff I'd had to be very careful because I'm not a trained psychologist or anything like that. I was mindful I don't want to get it out of my lane here. And, you know, that's something maybe more metaphysical practitioners, I think, should be careful of, is not necessarily thinking that because you're good at this, you're going to be good at that. So, but I was getting stuff, you know, and people would end up bringing them up. It's like I'd put sexual molestation, age 3 and 4, down in my notes, question mark, underlined. Turns out to be the case. Turns out to be the thread that I was feeling in the chart, and you know, pictures and images and stuff like that coming through. And you know, a lot of stuff that isn't, you know, as dark as that. Other, you know, everybody has a different story, and they're in the session for a different reason. But I took it like I was, you know, deep in my ancestry. There was maybe a Welsh bard or something, and I felt like I'm picking up the slack for the old Welsh bards. And so I embrace the practice as, you know, as I said, people are musical to me, or poetry. You know, people are like different poems, you know, in a skin suit, or even their skin suit is part of the poem. And so, like, to me, astrology and doing sessions is a way of like having this back and forth and tuning into their music. And sometimes people just want me to play their music back to them and talk at them for a while. Others are, you know, can do a little jazz duet with me. And we kind of we try to pick out the lines of the song that are the most germane for the particular moment and with the person. So that's my approach.
You said something that resonated with astrology of the thread, picking up the thread of the person. And when I look at it, that's kind of how I look at it for my own life, because I have to rely on others because I don't know enough. But what I'm looking for is like the journey in your life, those threads of important times or things that influence you.
Yes.
That's what I look at. And I find it frustrating sometimes when I see people living their lives completely surrendering to what the charts are telling them, or what the that's the threat, because we still have choice, we still have that balance, that dance with everything. But this is like a path, a guidepost, or dots in a map, pinpoints in your life that come up, I think. Is that how you
and
see
I
it?
never look at my like I actually never look at my own transits. Basically, like, I'm not one of those people. And if I were, I'd be like Yogananda, who was like, let's do the thing that's supposed to be hardest to do at this moment, you know. There's funny stories out of that. I'm not quite like that, but for me, it's almost more of I never treat it as a fortune telling thing, or this sort of reductionist thing, or fatalistic kind of thing. It ought not to be treated that way. It's more like I'll seek different currents and winds, and maybe it'll be something like, looks like if we play a samba right now, it'll be a lot more enjoyable than doing a waltz. You can do a waltz, but you know, it might be like running uphill with the wind in your direction or something like it. Just won't be as fun. I'll get a sense of, like, you know, planetary movements correlate to different types of things that are come. Some periods for people are meant to be fallow periods, maybe, or they'll benefit more if they don't try to be like this bootstrapping 16-hour-a-day Tasmanian devil of achievement and energy. And they benefit from more meditation and chilling out and a little bit of the Church of Dudism. Other people, you know, there might be indications they're like, 16 hours a day, bootstrap it, go full Aries or go home. And there's like a different sort of thing and different periods. And it's fun to look at.
I like
yeah.
that. And it's the
Yeah.
rhythm. It really is the rhythm
Yeah.
that you can play in your life.
Yeah. And I think of it as fun, like too. I don't think I think of it like theatrically too. Like we're in a costume department, and we're actually in a birth chart. We're looking at all the different sorts of props and costumes that are available, and it's more of like, okay, let's just get acquainted with these sorts of songs that are playing through you. Like I think of them as guiding myths. Everybody has different guiding myths. Some people have the same as another person, or very similar, but they all have a different sort of combination. And you kind of get a sense like, yeah, the Joan of Arc story is the one that's trying to come out right now. So let's feel into that, and let's see what happens there, and just to put it in mythic language. Yeah.
What were you gonna say, Angela?
I was just going to speak to his the overall the big picture, because that's what I'm seeing, and I'm so fascinated by it, because his story is so indicative of the progressive nature of awakening, right? Because you came into this plane of being, you came awake to a certain degree. And then through the non-indie experience, you open to a greater awareness of what is. And through that, there was a period of frustration where you sought to go back or to live in a way that was familiar to you, that was based on what was, and that created that frustration. And that's part of the process that we go through in awakening. That's the frustration point, is trying to make the new fit the old, which does not work. And it's a process of letting go of the old and being moved into the new. And so once you moved into the new, there's an ever expanding newness that arises that you're having to embrace and come into. So just hearing your story is so on point with that dynamic of how it goes for all of us. We just do it in our own unique ways. The catalysts that come about are different for each of us, but the themes are the same. Awakening, coming into a new awareness of self, that process of becoming, creating that frustration, trying to fit the old, moving into the new, and being in that newness and opening to the ever expanding newness that comes. So that was where I was going with that whole story, just listening to all of the pieces that you shared this morning. They so fit that dynamic that is so pertinent for all of us. Yeah.
I couldn't say it better. I'll paraphrase though and make it sound silly. I think we're basically all living out the story of green eggs and ham. Only instead of green eggs and ham, it's basically love, or some other word for love. And it comes in very strange forms sometimes. Like, how could you possibly? How could that possibly? Or we have a wizard knocking at our door. The self is knocking at our door, saying like, "This is you. Can you be you now? Can you drop this? Can you drop this tawdry facade you've been walking around with of your name and your parents and all these other things you think you are? Can you?" And basically that's it. Like the film Groundhog Day, which is also green eggs and ham.
Yeah, then maybe this speaks to that. Maybe this speaks to that blue being, because before, like in the beginning, when you saw that blue being, that was that feeling of separateness. But when you were able to finally experience that dream, flesh it out, see it to its completion, there was an understanding of the oneness, the true beingness that is,
Yeah, the myth was trying to resolve itself.
Yeah.
And the myth, every myth or every story, I think, has to resolve itself and finally coming back to the wholeness from which it came. And that was what was required for that aspect of self, or that inner myth to actually to come home. It needed sufficient love. It needed to know that actually awareness was larger than any particular, even very intense feelings it could experience.
Right.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think we also have in common is bet there's a lot of us watching, and I bet you have read a lot of Joseph Campbell. Have
I
you?
sort of, yeah.
Because that's
Monomyth
really,
waters.
those
Yeah.
journeys of those inner myths that we have are universal. And it really can bring so much insight. If you haven't read his work, it's so important.
Yes,
Yeah.
I've certainly found it enjoyable. Yeah.
It's like we're all the prodigal son or
Yeah.
the prodigal daughter who's like adventuring away from home to find yourself, only to come back home and realize that everything you wanted was there. But the journey was important. You needed to go away in order to come
Yeah,
back.
exactly.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
that classic thing with romantic comedies where a couple meets, they have a fight, and you know, they're fighting until they fall back in love again. It's the same, you know, the journey of the Christ, you know, where you find your power, you find your authentic self, and you have to go through trials. Like all of these things are, you know, reflections of different aspects of the same story of experiencing separation in order to find unity and wholeness again.
So I have to actually cut in because I didn't know we'd be going this long.
We go for 2 hours. Sorry.
I forgot. Sorry, there was 2 hours. Somehow that slipped by my mind.
No, it's okay.
But I actually have to do something right at the end of our 2 hours. I have a birth chart session that'll be running too.
So can we have you for like another 10-ish minutes?
Yes, we can do that.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to then talk to you about permaculture. And I know that this is one of those things where, I mean, it's not very woo-woo, but actually it's so critical. I feel like there's so much to be said and explored in terms of finding God in nature, finding God in the earth and in plants and how the ecosystem works. First of all, would you tell us what permaculture is?
Well, that's actually, it's almost like describing what is an archetype and how broad permaculture is. But I like the way Bill Mollison would shortly describe it. Permaculture, I can't do my Australian without hearing it. You know, like permaculture is earth care. That's a terrible Australian accent. I don't know. I can't do it right now. Apologies to all the Australians watching this who happen to be, I just butchered your dialect. But you know, earth care, people care. You know, permaculture is more than just fancy organic gardening, although that's a component of it. It's a deep attempt to live in ways that are in flow with nature instead of living in a way in which we're constantly sort of a dog chasing its own tail, which is one way we can look at using, like, say, all the petroleum that we have to produce the kind of crops that we live on. We ran out. It's no longer functional to mine a bunch of bat guano in South America and use that for our nitrogen and fertilizer. We learned how to pull nitrogen fertilizer out of petroleum itself and out of natural gas back in the 19th century. And that's what our world runs on. And we kind of deplete the soil, add a bunch of stuff and nutrients into it, and year after year, that's how we're doing it. Well, one of the things about permaculture is it's like, well, we might not be able to sort of technology ourselves out of this. We might not be able to count on constant technological developments of that sort to continue to feed ourselves and live in a way that's sustainable. Rather, let's look at maybe some different ways of doing this, of having closed loop systems on a small local scale in which we can actually start to rebuild the soil again, so we don't have to continue to add petroleum and other stuff that wears out after a year constantly. What are ways we can do that? So this is just a very small part of permaculture. So I think of it as let's try to find ways that we can. I like to be a lazy Taoist, and I think, like, what is the smartest and laziest and inflow way we could produce food and have economic systems possible? Let's think of how can we get the most out of doing the least, and in ways that could go on and on and on and on. That, to me, from my small angle, is where I connect with permaculture. I'm always thinking of let's plant things that kind of take care of themselves. Like, what is the least amount of work I can do in this system, and how can I produce and design a system that, you know, maybe take some investment as far as digging swales and other stuff like that. You know, that's altering the land. I'm not saying we shouldn't try to alter things. That's part of it. But how can we alter our environment in ways that will just start to feed itself? One of my favorite examples was actually Bill Mollison had this wonderful global gardening series on in the 1990s. You can find it on YouTube still. Look up Bill Mollison Global Gardening. Well, one of the episodes was deserts. And he noted that back in the 1930s, the Civil Conservation Corps had made all these swales in the Southwest, because when it rains in a desert, it like everything's blown away or pulled away in flash floods. And they wanted to kind of save, you know, sort of mitigate these flash floods. And so they built all these deep ditches. What they didn't expect to happen was that years later, these deep ditches that collect the water turned into little self-planting food forests, you know, and not all food, but if you planted pomegranates or date palms or stuff, you could grow those things in those swales. So inadvertently, the CCC in the 1930s, if they knew, they could have put they could have had all these little oases. That is like permaculture insight, or one of the great modern permaculture that's down in the Southwest. I'm down there with my mind, I don't know where, is a fellow named Brad Lancaster. You can see a lot of his videos on YouTube. And he's got 2 great books out on dry land water conservation. But, you know, he started on his neighborhood level, cutting the curbs illegally, digging swales in Tucson. Everyone was, you know, planting these, you know, grass lawns that just take so much work to keep going and so much water. They cut these swales, and now they've got date palms and pomegranates and guavas and fruits just growing everywhere. And there are mulching strategies. You know, that's one, you know, section. People are like, yeah, let's just mulch the hell out of it, you know. And for them, they're able to grow fruit trees with very little care, with very little water input, just what the sporadic rain brings. So, you know, this is part of it. I'm interested in, you know, deeply interested. I don't know why, but I've been interested in gardening for a long time. It's just very pleasurable to I don't do it for any reason, really. I just like it.
But it's one of those things that you were called to, because you talked about when you were a kid, when the pre-show chat, you talked about being a kid, and, you know, like most kids' Happy Meals, you'd like, that was the highlight, right? Getting a Happy Meal for a lot of us.
Yeah.
What a sad commentary on our culture. But nonetheless, as a kid, like eating a Happy Meal, and then your Happy Meal, it was like literal, like metal gardening tools and actual seed packets, which don't exist in anyone else's gardening meal. How did it end up in yours? Or anyone's
I don't know. We were,
I'm
sure that they did. Because, you know, we got it, so they must have done it. But I was in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, in 1988 or 1989 on a family trip, and we went to McDonald's, and that was my toy. And it was a very interesting experience to you know, it's like a watering can, a spade, and a bunch of seed, like 5 different types of seeds of very easy to grow plants, like radishes, green beans, stuff like that. You can just seed and get instant gratification. But when I saw it, there was an interesting thing that happened in my brain. I was like, oh, you know, I wasn't particularly interested in that, but there was a sense of like, you know, I always remember that line from Back to the Future where Marty McFly tells his baby uncle, like, get used to those bars, kid, you know, because his uncle is an adult, is in jail, and, you know, he's in the crib. And in my moment, was like, yeah, get used to that watering can, kid. You know, it's kind of how it struck me. And I didn't really connect to it until I was starting to come into the inner monk in my late teens. All of a sudden, I started getting an interest in, like, I've got to redo our yard. You know, like, I didn't have any knowledge, and I was like doing things in very bad ways, but just had this, like, I got to plant some tiger lilies in that corner, and I got to, you know, put a patio back there. And I guess, you know, there's just these energies to you know, get out there and work in a very amateurish sort of way. But you know, I had this one dream where I was like at this school where I would go when I would fall asleep above my lake, and I was giving a lecture, and I was giving a lecture on like on weird, like, quasi sci-fi spiritual botany practices. And I woke up in my body as a 17-year-old, and my first word was like, botany? You know, this is like, I don't have any knowledge of that at all, or an inclination. And so it's just by accident, years later, we sold our cafe, our monk-run cafe. And, when my Swiss friend said like, hey, we can do a gardening business. It's like, okay, we did it, put the money in, and then, wasn't doing real like gardening. You're doing, lawn mowing and weed whacking and that sort of stuff that can pay the bills. But that evolved into, other sorts of ends of the gardening spectrum. And so it kind of went to sort of like a long-term apprentice, didactic period. And yeah, that was my history with it.
Well, I just think that it's interesting because it's such a, I feel like it's irrelevant. It was almost lost science where I feel like that needed to be pulled back. And I feel like it's one of those things that you anchor. I'm wondering if you had any like Samadhi experiences while doing gardening, or like working on permaculture.
Oh my God.
Let's hear a little bit about a Samadhi gardening experience.
I don't know. Samadhi just happens whenever, when you're doing mantras. I mean, it's, Samadhi onion chopping, Samadhi gardening, Samadhi, car tune up. It's all kind of the same, but certainly there's lots of juicy experiences of just of feeling the love in the soil and in the plants, and having this is a little bit not exactly Samadhi, but the byproducts of it, feeling a sense of like being an instrument, and being in this wonderful circular flow of nature, and being having no sense of being some sort of separated agent who's somehow outside of what we think of as nature, which we often do, and just having this sense of just a very deeply animist sense of just playing your part in Pan's world, essentially. And like anything, like healers get when they work on the body, and get a sense of like, I'm just,
I bring it up because I've heard more than one person say about being out in their garden and going into a state of oneness accidentally because they're working with the earth, they're working with like these living beings that have roots instead of legs, and I just want to fan that fire with people, because I think we're coming into a time where it's more relevant than ever, and to know that there are people who've gone ahead and have a path where, if you're like, what is it? It sounds overwhelming. Like, well, it's okay. There's a path, or people have done it. There's something that you can, and the way that you did it, where you're like, I've got to plant tiger lilies. I don't know where or why, but like, I'm going to get in the dirt and start to play. Like, again, don't worry about doing it perfectly. Just get in the dirt and play. Like meditation, get in the dirt and play.
Yes.
Yeah, we are of the earth. So innately, there's a call, even though we might not realize it consciously, there's a subconscious call to connect with that which we are of. So that's where that lies. I at least that's my feeling toward it, that there's a call to connect with the earth, to be part of the earth, to nurture the earth, even though we may not have that conscious desire within our awareness. There's a tie that binds us to that which we extend from. So we are moved to nurture that to some degree. Yeah, whether you choose to honor
I think of
it
it
or
like
not.
that. Yeah. It's just like, I think, cats like to chase balls of string. I think that it's actually as instinctual for a cat to do that. I do think it's instinctual for a human being to do all the stuff that we do, and including get in there and plant trees, which on the surface looks like a very odd activity for an ape, but I think it's actually part of our apeness that's coming out as we're have evolved, and like, okay, that's wonderful.
Well, let's go ahead. Sorry, sir. Go ahead. Finish that thought.
Oh, sorry. I was going like, we should, wind it down. I'm sorry.
Wind it down. Yeah. No. What's your final thought for from your heart to ours? What is your thought, Mr. Ishtar?
I think it would be live with a capital L and an exclamation point after it, and that would be it. Whatever's in you, go for it. what's in your heart, your deep dreams, your aspirations, the love that's there. If you have a connection to it, as best as you can, do it in the moment when it's there. Don't put it off. And even if you put it off, like you put it off maybe 3-4 times, don't just when it comes around number 5, just go for it then and do it.
Excellent. Thank you for that. I'm going to flip this into gallery view. If you need to hop off, Mr. Ishtar, that is okay.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And I'm going to toss the mic to Linda and we'll start our gratitudes.
Yes, first of all,
Thank you, Linda.
for
Thanks,
joining
Angela.
us. Bye, Ishtar. Thank you for
Bye,
joining
Ishtar.
us.
Thank you. You're a delight.
Thank you.
Yes.
You're a delight.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us on this podcast. Another great one at a whole different level than what we've done before. And that's what I love about this show, is we get to talk about all kinds of wonderful things. And so you've added so much to the conversation. Please continue it in our Facebook group. So we will go there and continue talking about this. Love to hear more about your experiences with planting and bringing all of this into your life now, and meditation that works for you, since, swirls bounce off my head when I try. Be sure to check the links below so that if you do want to experience his meditations or get a reading from him of your astrology, it's down there, as well as Angela's. Thank you, Angela, for also adding so
Thank
much.
you.
You always put into words what is in my head, but never comes out of my mouth. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll let y'all know that next week is going to be Kevin Estrella. He's been on our show, it was probably like 1.5 years ago, and that's going to be next Sunday, the 8th. And Kevin is a musician. He has the band Pyramids on Mars. And he's also a contactee/ambassador for our ET friends, the Ponte. So we're going to be discussing his friendship with the Ponte and also the release of his latest album, Cosmic Angels, which is inspired by his ET visitations. So that's going to be super fun. We love ETs on this channel. And so that's going to be a really great place to dive into some firsthand experiences with Kevin. So beyond that, I'll just say, yeah, thanks again, everyone, for being here and being part of the conversation. Thank you, Angela. Thank you, Linda. Love you both. So much appreciation and gratitude for you. Be kind to yourself, be kinder to others. We love you, and we'll see you next week. Bye, everyone.